All right, so this is a Julia set renderer for the Commodore 64 that uses the video feedback technique. The technique is really simple, which is why it can be really fast. It just scans the raster on every frame and sort of interprets the X and Y location of the pixel as the real and imaginary parts of the complex plane, calculates the function z squared plus c, where this offset constant is controlled by the little eyeball sprite cursor, and then pulls the color data from that previous frame location and increments by 1. And ultimately, this converges to this calculation of the number of iterates to escape this sort of little screen area. You can also do proper video feedback effects with this sort of method, like blurring and filters, or putting in webcam feeds, or drawing things on top of it and getting it sucked into the fractal. That's what you would see in the old milk drop music visualizer, where the music draws little animations that get sucked around the fractal. But this is a Commodore 64 8-bit running at 1 megahertz, so we will take what we can get. And I'm sure you've heard of all these tricks that people do to get performance out of these old 8-bit computers. The one that ended up being most important for this was moving the core part of the code that does the fractal map and the screen blitting onto the first 256 bytes. They call it the 0 page, because that range of RAM can be addressed with a single byte, so it's a bit faster. And I mean, this map is sort of an indirect memory read, where you sort of have to look at the map value, and it's an offset, then get the screen data at that position. And that can be a bit slow, but if you actually just write the location you want to pull from directly into the code, self-modifying code, on the 0 page, that's pretty fast, and the lookups are a little bit faster. So that was the only thing that really made a huge difference. I mean, I did make one which have the vertical resolution and remove the dithering. It was faster, but it wasn't better. And you can turn on interlacing, so it only draws a fraction of the lines per frame, and then the new constant position that you move to will be immediately reflected in the screen, albeit at the cost of this sort of block glass effect. There's no limit on the number of iterates it can calculate. It'll just loop around the color palette 256 times, which means if we set it to one of the positions where the Julia set's connected and points inside that connected area actually orbit indefinitely rather than escaping, you get this sort of shimmering effects as you see the points go around their orbits. And in case this isn't lively enough, I also added this. If you press F, it rapidly rotates the color palette, which, you could also think of drawing some things into the fractal to give it a bit more activity. But yeah, I don't know. It's not exactly one of those 60 frames per second demos. I don't know how much faster it can get. Probably if you are willing to render types of video feedback effects that are not Julia set fractals, you may have some more options, because even though this is sort of mirror symmetric and you only have to render a half plane, copying it to the other half plane involves rotating and reversing, and that takes time. And there might be just nicer, simpler sort of patterns, recurrence patterns that still look good. Well, I guess that's it. Well, so there you go. Video feedback based fractal rendering works on the Commodore 64.